I sat at the long oak dining table, my glass of wine trembling slightly in my hand. The room was filled with laughter, the clinking of silverware against fine china, the soft hum of conversation. It was supposed to be a celebration, a milestone for the company I had spent 25 years of my life building. The business had hit $200 million in valuation. $200 million. A number that once seemed impossible when I first stepped into the office as a young, ambitious financial officer. I had taken my father-in-law's modest manufacturing firm and transformed it into an empire. And yet, as I sat there, something gnawed at me. A tension just beneath the surface of the warm smiles and raised glasses. Isabella, my wife, sat beside her father, her hand resting gently on his arm, her polished nails tapping idly against his sleeve. Across from me, a man I barely knew, Marcus, leaned back in his chair like he belonged there. I didn't like him. There was something smug about the way he carried himself, something artificial in the way he tried to exude confidence. He wasn't part of the company. He wasn't part of my team. He was a stranger. And yet, he was here, sitting at the table of a family dinner, too comfortable for someone who didn't belong. Charles, my father-in-law, raised his glass, the dim chandelier light catching the rim. "A toast," he said, his voice commanding as always, the voice of a man used to getting his way. "To success. To family." "To family," Isabella echoed, glancing at me with an odd smile. I lifted my glass slowly, my stomach tightening. Then Charles turned to Marcus, patted him on the back, and said the words that made my blood run cold. "Your wife's new husband will take over now." For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. The words didn't register, like a distant echo in my mind. But then Isabella smiled, smirked, and reached for Marcus's hand. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. My fingers clenched the base of my glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. The joke. The explanation. It never came. My pulse was thundering. My skin prickled with heat. My mind struggled to keep up with what was happening around me. The people at the table were still smiling, nodding, talking, as if my entire world hadn't just been set on fire. Isabella let out a soft laugh, like I was being ridiculous for reacting at all. "Oh, come on, Dominic. You knew this day would come. The company was never yours. You were always just a placeholder." Placeholder. The word hit me harder than any punch to the gut ever could. I forced myself to breathe, to stay still. This was a public setting, a calculated ambush. They wanted a reaction out of me. They wanted me to lash out, to cause a scene, to give them an excuse to paint me as the unreasonable one. I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. I set my glass down gently, pushing my chair back with deliberate calmness. My movements were slow, measured, the only thing I could control in this moment. I stood. The room quieted slightly, all eyes turning to me. I adjusted my cufflinks, straightened my tie. Then I looked at Isabella, looked at Charles, looked at Marcus. I memorized their faces, their expressions. And then, without a word, I turned and walked away. Not a single person at that table called after me. They thought I was walking away in defeat. They had no idea what was coming. The cold night air hit me as I stepped out of the restaurant, but it did nothing to cool the fire burning inside me. My hands clenched into fists at my sides, my jaw locked so tight it ached. Placeholder. That word rattled in my skull like a gunshot. 25 years. I had sacrificed 25 years of my life to that company. I built it from the ground up. I put in the hours, the sweat, the sleepless nights. While Isabella was off spending money she hadn't earned, while Charles was too busy clinging to his outdated ideas, while Marcus, that smug bastard, was doing God knows what, I had been working. I had made them all rich. And in return, they had been planning this. For how long? Months? Years? The humiliation of that dinner clung to me like a disease. The way they had all smiled, so sure that I would just accept it, that I would lower my head, shake Marcus's hand, and walk away with nothing but a pat on the back for my efforts. They thought I would just disappear. I reached my car and yanked open the door, sliding into the driver's seat. My hands gripped the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. They had no idea what was coming. I had suspected Isabella was up to something for a while. The way she had started locking her phone. The sudden business trips, that didn't make sense. The way she avoided certain topics when I brought them up. But this wasn't just some petty betrayal. This wasn't just an affair. This was war. I took a deep breath, forcing my mind to focus. Anger was a dangerous thing if you let it consume you. I wasn't about to make rash decisions. No, that was their game, playing off emotion, hoping I would make a mistake. I wasn't going to play. I was going to win. Pulling out my phone, I scrolled through my contacts and found the number I needed. A direct line. One I had never used before, but had always kept for this exact moment. I pressed call. It rang twice before a voice answered. Mr. Carter? Yes, I said, my voice steady, calm, controlled. It's time. There was a brief pause. Then, the man on the other end simply said, Understood. I ended the call and set my phone down, staring out at the dark city skyline ahead of me. By the time Isabella, Charles, and Marcus stepped into the office tomorrow morning, everything would change. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. The lobby was empty, the polished marble floors reflecting the cold, artificial light overhead. The receptionist, Emily, looked up from her desk, startled to see me this early. Good morning, Mr. Carter, she said, hesitantly. There was something in her voice, a slight nervousness, like she could sense something was wrong. I gave her a small nod, not stopping as I made my way to the executive floor. My office. The office that, by the end of today, would no longer belong to me, at least, that's what they thought. Inside, everything was as I had left it. The large glass windows gave me a perfect view of the city skyline, a sight I had admired every morning for years. This place had been mine. I had built every brick of this empire. And now, they thought they could just take it from me. I sat at my desk, opening my laptop. The moment my fingers hit the keyboard, the plan I had spent years crafting began to unfold. Every keystroke was precise. Every file I accessed, every document I pulled up, it was all calculated. This was what they never understood. I had known this day was coming. I had seen the signs. The small power shifts. The way Charles had started taking a greater interest in things he had long neglected. The way Isabella had slowly distanced herself from me, dropping hints that I should take things easy. The way Marcus had conveniently entered the picture, always lurking on the sidelines, waiting like a damn vulture. They thought they were smart. They thought I would be blindsided. They thought I would walk out of here with nothing. They were wrong. A knock on the door. I didn't bother looking up. I knew who it was before she even spoke. Dominic, Isabella's voice came, smooth as ever, but with an edge of something sharp beneath it. I could hear the satisfaction dripping from her tone. You're here early. I continued typing, ignoring her. She walked further into the office, her heels clicking against the floor. I could picture her perfectly, dressed to perfection, radiating confidence, convinced that she had already won. I thought you'd take the day off, she continued, settling into the chair across from my desk. You know, considering everything. I finally looked up at her, my expression unreadable. Considering what? I asked, my voice perfectly calm. She smiled. That smug, infuriating smile. Come on, Dominic, she said with a soft laugh, tilting her head. We don't have to do this. You knew this wasn't forever. You were always just placeholder. I already knew what she was going to say. The same word she had used last night. The same word that had been ringing in my head ever since. I didn't let her finish. I hit enter on my keyboard. And just like that, the world they thought they controlled started burning. Isabella's phone buzzed. Then buzzed again. Then again. I watched as she frowned, pulling it out of her purse. I saw the way her confident expression faltered, the way the color drained slightly from her face. What? She muttered, scrolling through her messages. I leaned back in my chair, watching her closely. Then the door burst open. Charles stormed in, his face red, his phone clenched in his fist. What the hell is going on? He barked. I remained silent, letting them feel it, letting them realize. Isabella looked at me now, her eyes sharp with something between confusion and fear. I finally spoke. You really thought I was going to let you hand over my company to him? My voice was quiet, controlled, dangerous. Marcus was still nowhere to be seen. Not that it mattered. By the time he did show up, there wouldn't be a damn thing left for him to take. Isabella's breath hitched slightly. What did you do? I smiled. Check the accounts. I watched as Charles's fingers fumbled over his phone, as Isabella's eyes flickered between panic and denial. And then, the moment of realization hit them. It was over. For them. The silence in my office stretched, thick and suffocating. The kind of silence that precedes an explosion. Charles's face contorted, the deep red in his cheeks spreading to his neck as his grip on his phone tightened. He looked like a man who had just realized he'd stepped off a cliff and was now plummeting into the abyss. Isabella, for the first time in years, looked lost. Her fingers trembled as she refreshed her banking app, scrolling through the numbers, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. Where is it? She whispered. I tilted my head. Where is what? I asked, my voice calm, deliberate. Charles slammed his palm against my desk, the veins in his forehead bulging. The goddamn money, Dominic. The contracts, the assets, everything is gone. Asterisk, his voice cracked at the end. I let out a slow breath, leaning forward, resting my elbows on my desk. I locked eyes with Isabella first. I wanted her to feel it, the weight of what she'd done, the weight of what I had done in return. You never understood, did you? I said quietly. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. You thought this company was yours, I continued, because your father started it, because you shared his last name, because you had the luxury of sitting back while I spent 25 goddamn years building it into something bigger than either of you ever imagined. I turned my gaze to Charles now. His breathing was shallow, his fury barely contained beneath the shock. You assumed I was loyal, I said with a slow, deliberate shake of my head. You assumed I would just step aside, that I would let you and your daughter's new husband waltz in and take everything from me. Charles's nostrils flared. I own this company, Dominic. Correction, I said, my tone cutting. You owned a company, a name, a shell. I gestured toward Isabella's phone. What you don't own are the contracts, the accounts, the clients, the infrastructure, the people who actually run this operation. I leaned back and folded my hands. Because all of that? It's mine now. Isabella let out a shaky breath, her hands gripping the armrests of her chair so tightly that her knuckles turned white. No, she murmured, shaking her head. That's not possible. Oh, but it is, I said, keeping my tone infuriatingly casual. You see, while you were busy planning your little coup, I was planning for it. Charles was staring at me like he had just realized he was in a cage with a lion. I let the moment stretch, let them drown in the weight of what had just happened. Then, finally, I stood. I adjusted my suit jacket, buttoning it slowly, deliberately. This morning, I said, stepping out from behind my desk, every senior executive in this company, every key department head, every competent employee resigned. I turned to Isabella. Where do you think they went? Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. Where do you think the suppliers went? I continued. The clients? The accounts? Her mouth parted slightly. She knew the answer. She just couldn't bring herself to say it. I stepped past them, walking toward the door. You and your father can keep the name, I said as I reached for the handle. Marcus can have the desk. I turned my head just slightly, my final words cutting through the air like a blade. But the business? The actual empire? I let out a low chuckle. That left with me at midnight. And with that, I walked out, leaving them drowning in the ruins of what they had tried to steal. I walked out of my office, and the moment my feet hit the hallway, a weight lifted off my shoulders. Not because I was free of them, not yet, but because they were trapped. Isabella, Charles, Marcus, they had spent God knows how long plotting my downfall, believing they were the ones holding the knife. They were so damn sure that I'd be left scrambling, humiliated, powerless. But instead, they were the ones suffocating under the weight of their own arrogance. The executive floor was eerily silent, save for the distant ringing of phones at the now empty reception desk. Normally, this place would be buzzing with activity, assistants rushing back and forth, Meetings being scheduled. Deals being made. Not today. Today, the heart of this company, the real, working core of it, had disappeared. I stepped into the elevator, pressing the button for the lobby. As the doors slid shut, I allowed myself a small, satisfied breath. They thought they could rob me. Instead, I had left them with an empty shell. The elevator doors opened with a quiet chime, and I stepped into the lobby, where the reality of their downfall was already setting in. A few remaining employees lingered, confused and aimless. A man in a tailored suit, one of our biggest investors, former investor, was pacing by the front desk, phone pressed to his ear, his face twisted in fury. He barked something about unexplained withdrawals and contracts suddenly voided. I strolled past him without a glance. Near the entrance, a group of junior staff huddled together, whispering. Their gazes flickered toward me, uncertain, as if I were a ghost of something they'd already lost. I didn't stop. The moment my shoes hit the pavement outside, my phone vibrated. I pulled it out and checked the screen. Isabella. I smiled. That was fast. I let it ring. Let her feel that panic, that helplessness, just a little longer. Then, just before it went to voicemail, I answered. I didn't say a word. At first, neither did she. There was only the sound of her uneven breathing. Then, finally, she spoke, and for the first time in years, there was no smugness, no condescension. Dominic. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Please, you can't do this. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, savoring the desperation in her tone. Do what, Isabella? I said smoothly. Take my business? Secure my future. This isn't fair, she stammered. You can't just walk away with everything. I almost laughed at that. The sheer audacity of her saying that to me after she and her father had planned to hand my life's work to another man like I was nothing more than an old office chair they were tossing out. Oh, but that's where you're wrong, I said, my voice calm, unwavering. I can. And I did. She let out a shaky breath. We can fix this. There's nothing to fix, I replied. You made your choice. This is the consequence. Dominic, please. Her voice cracked. I didn't let her finish. I ended the call. And then, for the first time in 25 years, I walked away truly free. As I slipped my phone back into my pocket, a strange sensation settled over me. Freedom. It wasn't just a word anymore. It was real. Tangible. For the first time in 25 years, I wasn't shackled to that company, to that family, to her. I was no longer the man working in the shadows, building an empire for people who never appreciated it. Now, they were the ones left in the dark. I took a deep breath, inhaling the crisp morning air, and stepped toward my car. Before I could reach it, my phone buzzed again. Charles. I let it ring twice before answering. What? I said flatly, stepping off the curb. What the hell did you do, Dominic? His voice was a mixture of rage and barely contained panic. I just got off the phone with legal. The contracts, the assets, you siphoned everything out. Everything. I didn't siphon anything, I said, unlocking my car with a beep. I moved what was mine. You son of a... Careful, I cut in, opening the driver's side door. Your blood pressure, Charles. His breath came out in ragged, furious gasps. You think you've won? He seethed. This isn't over. We'll sue you. I smiled, settling into the driver's seat. Go ahead, I said casually. Sue me. Let's take this to court. Let's pull up every legal document from the last 2 decades. Every contract, every ownership clause, every executive agreement. Let's see how well your lawyers handle the fact that you signed off on every single financial decision I made for the last 25 years. Silence. Charles wasn't stupid. He knew exactly what that meant. If this goes to court, I continued, the only thing you'll prove is how little control you had over the company you thought was yours. I paused. Or worse, how much you neglected it. His silence stretched, his mind likely racing, scrambling for an angle that didn't exist. Let's be honest, Charles, I said, gripping the steering wheel. You don't have the time, the energy, or the money to fight me on this. You lost. Accept it. His breathing had slowed now, but not because he had calmed down. No, this was something else. a realization creeping in. You planned this, he muttered, almost to himself. I smirked. What? You thought I'd build a $200 million empire and just let it be taken from me? I chuckled. Please. There was another beat of silence before Charles spoke again, his voice lower now. Controlled. Calculated. We can negotiate, he said. I laughed. Actually laughed. Negotiate what? The scraps I left you? We can rebuild, he said quickly. We still have the infrastructure, the name. The name. I cut him off. Yeah, sure. Keep the name. Hell, put it on a plaque. Frame it. Hold a damn funeral for it. Because that's all it is now, a name. I leaned back against my seat. The people? The money? The actual business? That's with me. You and Isabella are just standing in an empty house, looking for furniture that isn't there. I could hear it now, the defeat creeping into his breath. What do you want, Dominic? He asked finally, the bitterness thick in his voice. I smiled. There it is. You already gave me what I wanted, I said simply. My freedom. And with that, I ended the call. Charles would try to fight this, of course he would. But the truth was, he had nothing left to fight with. He and Isabella had spent years convincing themselves that I was just a tool, a disposable asset, that I was loyal because I had to be. They never considered that I was watching, that I was planning, that one day I would leave them with nothing. I put my car into drive, pulling out of the parking lot one final time. I didn't look back. The engine purred as I pulled onto the main road, my grip on the wheel firm but relaxed. The city stretched out before me, glimmering in the early morning light. A new day, a new life. But I wasn't done yet. There was one last loose end to tie up. I had left Isabella and Charles in ruins, but there was still one more fool who thought he could step into my shoes. Marcus. I had barely given him a thought up until now, because, frankly, he wasn't worth thinking about. A man like him didn't build businesses. He inherited them, leeching off the work of others, assuming entitlement was the same as competence. He wasn't just stepping into a burning building, he was walking into ash. Still, I wanted to see his reaction when reality hit him square in the face. I checked my watch. If Isabella and Charles had scrambled to reach me, Marcus had undoubtedly gotten wind of the disaster by now. And knowing men like him, he was either panicking or, worse, trying to convince himself that he could fix it. I smirked. Time to shatter that illusion. I made one call. It rang once before a voice answered, low and nervous. Mr. Carter? Is he there? I asked. Yes, sir, the man on the other end said. You were right. He came in an hour ago, talking like he runs the place. He's in your, excuse me, his office now. I chuckled. Perfect. I'll be there in 15, I said. Yes, sir. I hung up, my foot pressing just a little harder on the gas. 15 minutes later, I pulled into the lot, walking through the front doors of my former company with an ease that felt almost criminal. A few remaining employees still lingered in the lobby, eyes darting toward me, their faces painted with uncertainty. They didn't know who to follow. Good. I took the elevator straight up to the executive floor, stepping out into a hallway that felt eerily quiet. No buzzing assistants. No scheduled calls. Just silence. I walked straight to my office, the one Marcus thought belonged to him now. I didn't knock. I shoved the door open, stepping inside with all the confidence of a man who still owned the place. Marcus was standing behind my desk, staring at his laptop, his expression growing more frustrated by the second. Papers were scattered across the surface, contracts, financial reports, employee files. A mess. He looked up the moment I entered, his face twisting from confusion to anger in an instant. You have some nerve coming back here, he spat, slamming his hands on the desk. This isn't your office anymore. I ignored him, stepping further inside, scanning the room like I was inspecting my own property. Because, in a way, I was. Finally, I met his gaze. You look stressed, Marcus, I said, my voice laced with amusement. First day on the job not going so well? His jaw clenched. Whatever bullshit you pulled, we'll fix it. I smiled. Oh, we. I let my gaze drift toward the doorway. Who exactly is we? Because last I checked, no one is left. He hesitated. I stepped closer. Tell me, Marcus, what was the plan? Walk in here, kick your feet up, let the money roll in while you played CEO? I let out a soft chuckle. Did Isabella tell you that's how it works? His nostrils flared. I don't need a damn lecture from you. No, you need a miracle, I shot back. Because let me make something very clear to you, Marcus. I placed my hands flat on the desk, leaning forward. What you're standing in. This is a graveyard. A hollow, empty shell of something that used to be great. I was the one who made this company what it was. And now, I smirked. Now, I've taken everything that made it valuable and left you with a rotting corpse. His face paled. He knew I was right. I straightened, adjusting my suit jacket. You wanted my job? I said, tilting my head. Well, enjoy it. Then I turned and walked out, leaving him drowning in the ruins of his own delusions. I walked out of that office with a satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. Not just because I had obliterated them, really, but because I knew what was coming next. Marcus thought today was his worst day? Oh, the real storm hadn't even begun. By now, the investors had started talking. The board members were scrambling. Lawsuits were brewing. The news was spreading through the industry like wildfire. A $200 million company didn't just collapse overnight without making waves. Marcus wasn't stepping into a legacy. He was stepping into a scandal. And there wasn't a damn thing he could do about it. I stepped back into the elevator, pressing the button for the lobby. The doors slid shut, enclosing me in silence. My reflection stared back at me in the metallic surface, calm, collected, untouchable. Then my phone buzzed again. Isabella. I let it ring. I knew exactly what she wanted. Begging. Bargaining. Desperation. She would throw Marcus under the bus first. Tell me she had been manipulated, that she had been pressured into this plan. She would talk about the history we had together, the love we once shared, as if that would somehow erase what she had done. But I wasn't the same man she had played for a fool all these years. I let the call go to voicemail. Then another buzz, a message this time. Dominic, please. We need to talk. I messed up. I see that now. Just meet me, please. I can explain. I smirked. Oh, I had no doubt she could explain. Explain why she was perfectly fine tossing me aside. Why she spent years pretending to be my partner while secretly planning my downfall. Why she thought I would just roll over and accept it. She could explain all of it. And I still wouldn't give a damn. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped out into the lobby, walking past confused employees who were still piecing together the disaster unfolding above their heads. I pushed open the main doors and stepped outside, greeted by the crisp morning air. Then, for the hell of it, I pulled up my messages and typed a response. You made your choice, Isabella. Now live with it. Then I hit send. And as I walked toward my car, I could already feel my phone buzzing again. She wasn't ready to accept it, but she would. I slid into my car, shutting the door with a satisfying thud. The moment my phone buzzed again, I glanced down at the screen. Isabella. Again. Pathetic. This woman, the same woman who sat across from me last night, smirking as she announced that her new husband was taking my place, was now calling me on a loop like a desperate salesperson who just realized she lost her biggest client. I let it ring, my fingers drumming against the steering wheel. Then, as the call went to voicemail, another message popped up. Dominic, for God's sake, at least give me a chance to talk to you. I don't know what happened. Everything is gone. We can't fix this without you. I laughed. A deep, genuine laugh that rumbled in my chest. Oh, now we're at it again. Now that the empire she thought was hers had crumbled to dust, now that her father was panicking and Marcus was drowning in his own incompetence, now she wanted to talk? I wasn't an idiot. This wasn't regret. This was survival. She wasn't calling because she was sorry. She was calling because she was afraid. I started the engine, letting the soft hum of power beneath me fill the silence. Then another buzz. This time, a voicemail notification. Oh, this should be good. I tapped the screen, raising the phone to my ear. At first, all I could hear was her breathing, uneven, shaky, like she had just run a marathon. Then, finally, her voice came through, and for the first time in years, Isabella sounded small. Dominic, please. I need you to call me back. I let my head rest against the seat, eyes closed as I listened. Everything is falling apart. My dad is losing his mind. The board is in chaos. We have investors demanding answers. The legal team is saying she cut herself off, inhaling sharply. I could picture her now, pacing some luxury penthouse, her perfectly manicured nails digging into her palm, trying to find a way to spin this into something salvageable. Then came the final part, the part one had been waiting for. I made a mistake. A slow smile crept across my face. Of course she did. I let the voicemail play out, hearing the wretched sound of desperation creeping into her tone. Marcus isn't. He's useless, Dominic. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's panicking, and my father, he won't admit it, but he needs you. That's when her voice dropped lower. Softer. I need you. I opened my eyes. There it is. The final, pathetic attempt to reel me back in. I know I hurt you, she continued, her voice shaking slightly. I was stupid, okay? I thought it was the right thing to do. But I see it now. You were the only one who ever really cared about this company. About me. I felt nothing. Not a flicker of sympathy. Not a shred of temptation. Because this wasn't love. This was her realizing she had made the biggest mistake of her life and trying to manipulate her way out of it. And I wasn't that man anymore. The voicemail ended with one final, broken whisper. Please, Dominic. Just call me. I tossed my phone onto the passenger seat, shifting into gear. She thought she could erase 25 years of betrayal with one desperate phone call? No. She made her bed. And now, she was going to rot in it. I drove through the city streets, the weight of 25 years finally peeling off my shoulders like a second skin I no longer needed. The morning sun reflected off the glass skyscrapers, and for the first time in decades, I saw the world differently. Clearer, sharper, freer. I didn't know Isabella a damn thing. Not a conversation. Not a second chance. Not even a response. She wanted to talk. She wanted to cry, beg, manipulate. She could scream into the void for all I cared. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Isabella. It was a message from an old friend. We're set. Everything's in place. Let me know if you want to make it official. I smirked. Time for the final nail in the coffin. I made a quick turn, heading toward a building that, up until last night, I had never considered my own. It had always been a backup, a contingency I had built in silence, waiting for the day I'd need it. And now, it was the future. I pulled into the underground parking lot of Carter Enterprises. My real company. A company built under their noses. One they never even saw coming. The moment I stepped out of the car, the doors at the other end of the lot opened, and my team, the real minds behind the empire I had built, stood waiting for me. They hadn't hesitated to walk away from the sinking ship that was now Isabella and Charles's problem. They had followed me, because they knew the truth. I wasn't just some disposable placeholder. I was the man who made things happen. I strode toward them, my mind already moving 100 miles an hour. Plans. Deals. A future without the dead weight of Isabella and her pathetic family dragging me down. As we stepped into the sleek, modern offices of Carter Enterprises, I pulled out my phone one last time. Another message from Isabella. Dominic, we can fix this. Please just tell me where you are. I'll come to you. I'll do whatever it takes. I exhaled slowly. Then I typed my final response. I already fixed it. You're just not part of the solution. I hit send, slipped my phone back into my pocket, and stepped into my boardroom. It was time to build something better. Something mine. And I was never looking back. I stood at the head of the conference table, looking around at the people who had truly built the empire alongside me. These weren't leeches like Charles, Isabella, or that idiot Marcus. These were the real architects of success, the minds, the talent, the people who had trusted me long before any of this went down. They were still here, because I was still here. I straightened my cuffs, exhaled slowly, and began. Gentlemen, I said, my voice steady, confident, unchallenged, as of today, we move forward. No more dead weight, no more wasted time. Everything we built, we take with us. Every client, every contract, every real asset, ours. A few nods, a few knowing smiles. They had been waiting for this moment, just like I had. What's our official statement? One of my legal advisors asked. I smirked. Oh, we're not saying anything. Confused looks. I leaned forward, resting my hands on the polished surface of the table. Let them talk. Let the media speculate. Let the board panic. Let Isabella and Charles scramble to explain what happened to their investors. We don't need to justify anything. The more silent we are, the louder their failure will become. A ripple of understanding passed through the room. This wasn't just about winning. This was about watching them burn themselves to the ground. One of the department heads chuckled. So we just sit back and let them destroy what's left of the name? I smiled. Exactly. Because I knew how this would play out. Marcus would fail. He already had. He was out of his depth, drowning in financials he didn't understand, trying to lead people who didn't respect him. Charles would try to recover, but the moment he realized he had no real control, the board would eat him alive. And Isabella? She would do what she did best. Manipulate. Beg. Try to find another savior. But there wouldn't be one. Because I had made sure of it. My phone vibrated. Another message. I already knew who it was before I even glanced at the screen. Isabella. I didn't read it. I just deleted it. Then I turned my phone off completely. Enough was enough. I looked at the faces around the table. The people who mattered. The people who actually believed in what we had built. Let's get to work, I said. And just like that, my new empire began. Stronger. Better. Mine.